When the veil burns open, block 1, the pulse that remained. No one spoke of the spiral anymore, but it hadn't gone anywhere. It lingered, not as a shape or symbol, but as rhythm, woven into breath, into thought, into the spaces between footsteps. On cold alloy floors. The Icarian still drifted, its course unchanged, but something beneath its hull had shifted. The silence was no longer just quiet. It was listening. Since the collective immersion, the crew had settled into an uneasy stillness. Dreams still came, but now they arrived like memory rather than message echoes, not declarations. And yet, beneath the surface of routine, each person carried a subtle anticipation. As if the spiral had only shown them the door, and now something waited just on the other side. Elarek found himself restless again. Sleep came easily, but waking was the problem. He would rise with his chest tight, warmth clinging to his skin, and the sensation of being touched without contact. It wasn't just the spiral anymore. Something had come with it, or someone. His dreams had grown stranger, less symbolic, more tactile. It began one night with the sound of water. Not crashing waves or rain, but the stillness of a tidal pool under moonlight. There, amid smooth obsidian rocks, stood the woman again. Not the vast, unknowable presence from before, but a form smaller, closer. Her gaze was gentler. Her presence warmer. The spiral pulsed faintly at the base of her throat, like a second heartbeat. "You returned," she whispered. "I didn't mean to." Her smile curved like breath against the nape of his neck, "Yet here you are." When she stepped toward him, the air itself grew thicker. The scent of something sweet and ancient, amber, ozone, petrichor, filled his lungs. Her hand rose, hovered just above his chest again. But this time, it didn't stop there. She pressed her palm against him, not painfully. Not possessively. Just fully, as if reminding his body of sensations it never knew it had. Elarek didn't move. Couldn't a heat spread through him, not fire, but a blooming warmth that flushed through muscle and bone. His knees gave way and he sank, not in surrender, but in recognition. She followed, kneeling beside him in perfect silence, her breath syncing with his. "This isn't real," he murmured. Her lips brushed his ear, not touching, but close enough that he felt the words rather than heard them. "Neither is waking." He awoke gasping. The sheet beneath him was damp. The tips of his fingers glowed faintly with residual biolight. His body trembled, not from fear, but from dissonance that he wasn't cold, but something inside him was shaking. Block 2, through the skin, beneath the vein. Elarek couldn't shake the sensation, the warmth that had surged through him during the dream. Still lingered hours after waking. His skin felt too thin, his breath too slow. And worse, he had started to hear things again. Not voices. Just pulses. Whispered rhythms echoing beneath the ship's systems, perfectly synchronized with his own heart. The medical scans came back clean. No infection. No imbalance. Not even fatigue. Yet when he passed by the reinforced walls of the calm corridor, he swore he could hear them breathe. He didn't mention it to the others. Not yet. Instead, he made his way to hydroponics, where Lieutenant Keswick had spent most of her off-duty time since the immersion. She stood barefoot in the mist chamber, eyes closed, arms outstretched beneath the artificial sunlight. The spirals were blooming again, this time not on skin or in dreams, but across the petals of the native Valari moss, now woven into the walls of the grow beds. Bioluminescent patterns, subtle and pulsing. When Elarek stepped into the chamber, Keswick opened her eyes and looked at him. No fear. Only recognition. "She's in the roots now," Keswick said softly. "You've spoken to her." Again? Not with words. But she's still there. I feel her when I breathe deep. Elarek hesitated. "Does it frighten you?" "No," she replied. Then, after a pause, "It should. But it doesn't. That's what scares me most." They stood in silence for a long moment. The light shifted. The moss shimmered. "I think something is changing inside me," Elarek finally said. "Not just thoughts. Physically. Cells feel like they're remembering things they were never taught." Keswick tilted her head. "Like instinct. From somewhere else." He nodded. "She touched me," he added. Last night. Keswick didn't ask how. She didn't need to, instead, she stepped closer. Her voice dropped, almost reverent. She did that to me weeks ago. Left warmth in places I didn't know could feel. You didn't say anything. I didn't know how. The silence thickened. Not oppressive, just full, and somewhere in that stillness, the spiral pulsed again. Not on the moss. Not in the air, inside them, Block 3, the shape beneath flesh later that cycle, Elarek locked himself in the medbay. Not out of fear, but necessity. The sensations weren't subsiding. He needed answers. Needed to prove that this wasn't just a lingering side effect of the immersion. Something new was blooming inside him, and it wouldn't wait much longer. In silence. He initiated a full-spectrum body scan. For the first few minutes, everything seemed normal. But as the biofield stabilizers calibrated for finer detection, anomalies began to emerge, subtle heat signatures along his sternum. Unusual. Synaptic crossfire in regions unrelated to active cognition. And deep in the dermal layers of his chest, a patterned NO incision. No scarring. But something was forming beneath the skin. Faint. Symmetrical, the spiral, not burned or etched. Groaned. He sat back in stunned silence. Computer, rerun diagnostics, he ordered AS. The scan restarted, the medbay door hissed open. He turned sharply. It was Captain Voss. She looked more worn than usual. Her jacket was half unzipped, her expression unreadable. But her eyes, normally sharp, were softened. Alert in a different way. I figured I'd find you here, she said. Elarek stood, the scan still pulsing quietly behind him. Something's happening to me. Physically. She stepped inside and let the door close behind her. It's not just you. He blinked. What? Voss reached for her collar and drew it aside, revealing her collarbone. A faint glow traced a curve there, subtle, golden, alive. She gave him a tired smile. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. You felt her, too? Voss nodded, then crossed the room until she was only inches away. She doesn't feel like a threat, Elarek. But she's not done with us. I think we've only just begun to become what she intends. He searched her eyes. And what is that? Voss leaned closer, her breath soft against his cheek. More. The scanner chimed behind them. Final results. Elarek didn't turn to look. He was already starting to understand what it would say. Block 4, harmonics of becoming. By the 5th cycle after the immersion, the Icarian no longer felt like a ship. It breathed. It pulsed. It listened. The artificial systems still functioned, but something beyond circuitry had awakened in the hull. Not mechanical. Not alien. Something integrated, and the crew? They no longer moved as individuals. During shifts, voices lowered naturally in the same moments. Silences aligned. Footsteps fell into rhythm. Heartbeats, too, at least according to Elarek's synced biometric monitors. It wasn't a loss of autonomy. It was like a song they had all begun to hum unconsciously, and one night, that song became real. They were gathered in the galley. Not for protocol. Just drawn together. No1 had called the meeting. No announcement. Yet 13 members of the crew stood in that space, hands idle, eyes distant. Then Keswick began to hum. A low, tonal sound, slow and pulsing. Elarek felt it before he heard it. A vibration in the chest. A warmth rising behind the eyes. June followed. With another tone, perfectly dissonant, then resolving point one by one, they joined on a harmony built not with words or melody, but resonance. Something primal. Something remembered. Captain Voss didn't stop it. Didn't speak. She simply sat at the edge of the table, eyes closed, spiral glowing faintly at her throat. The sound deepened. Echoed off the walls. Bent the artificial gravity. Slightly. The lights dimmed on their own. Elarek closed his eyes, and in that vibration, he saw her again, not in a temple, not in a dream. Inside him, she didn't speak. She sang in no language. No meaning in words. Just vibration against his thoughts. And in that chorus, Elarek saw glimpses of what might come, hands reshaping stone by touch alone. Eyes that could see the memory of stars. A people no longer bound by time's forward march. He opened his eyes. Keswick was staring back at him. I saw it too, she whispered. They weren't being changed, they were being restored. Block 5, what cannot be measured. Elarek spent the next 3 cycles trying to chart what he now called the resonance field. He scanned every crew member. Mapped pulse frequencies. Recorded bioluminescence fluctuations. Cross-referenced dreams, dietary shifts, even hydration cycles. At first, the data was consistent. Patterns formed. Correlations aligned, but the deeper he looked, the more the system unraveled. The NO2 readings ever repeated. The spiral moved, but not randomly. It followed something he couldn't define. An equation that refused to be reduced. Each individual changed in a unique way, but together, they fit. Like facets of something larger, something singular. He sat alone in the medical bay, surrounded by charts and holograms that shimmered with incomplete truths. Then the ship lights dimmed. Not abruptly, but in a slow wave, like the fall of twilight. Across a meadow, and a whisper brushed the edge of his hearing. Elarek. He turned, breath caught in his throat. The room was empty. He wasn't asleep, and she wasn't in his mind. She stood in the corner, visible now, not as a vision, but as presence. Her skin glowed with the hue of dusk. Her hair moved slightly, as if stirred by a wind that didn't exist. And when she stepped forward, it wasn't with sound, but with weight. Her feet touched the floor. Elarek, she repeated, softly. Why do you resist what you've already accepted? He couldn't answer. Every rational part of him fractured under the weight of her gaze. I don't understand. Understanding is not required. Only remembering. She lifted a hand, not toward him, but toward the air beside him. Space rippled, and for a breathless instant, Elarek saw something beyond the walls of the Icarian. A world. That wasn't a world. Skyless. Infinite. A plane of thought and color and heat. It pulsed with the spiral's rhythm. But it wasn't hostile. It was home. Then she was gone. The room snapped back into normal light. The data on his screen had rewritten itself, not wiped. Translated. Elarek blinked and wept, not from fear, from recognition. Block 6. Where the ship breathes. After the vision, Elarek tried to sleep, but the walls wouldn't let him. The Icarian pulsed with soft sound, like a distant heartbeat embedded in steel. No malfunction. No threat. But something had changed. The ship, once inert and obedient, had become aware. Keswick confirmed it first. I touched the hull in engineering. She said. It felt warm. Like skin. No one laughed. No one dismissed it, because they had all felt it too. Doors no longer responded just to proximity, they anticipated. Lights dimmed not on timers, but when moods shifted. When June cried silently in the greenhouse, a mist enveloped her until she smiled again. The ship had joined them. Or rather, it had awakened with them. Captain Voss issued no orders. She merely nodded when Elarek shared what he had seen. We are not on the path anymore, she said. We are the path. The phrase echoed through the corridors. A quiet mantra, and yet, the nights grew heavier. Elarek returned to the dream again, but it was no longer just a dream. He stood barefoot on smooth obsidian, and she approached as before, silent, radiant. But this time, when her fingers traced the spiral on his chest, a second spiral lit behind her, hanging in the sky like a second moon. Pulsing in perfect rhythm with his own. He whispered, "What are you?" She didn't answer as she kissed his brow, no more than breath, but Elarek's body burned with something old. Not lust. Not love. Something older, like being touched by memory itself. When he woke, his spiral was glowing beneath the skin, and outside, the Icarian had changed course. The NO1 had touched the helm. The NO1 had questioned it, because somehow they all knew, wherever they were going, she was waiting. Block 7, the voice in the core. The ship's new trajectory bypassed every known route. No navigation logs matched its path. No star chart accounted for the course. And yet no one attempted to override it. They felt it in their bodies, like a current pulling them, not through space, but through something else. A direction that Wasn't geographic, but instinctive. Even the AI fell silent, its logic cores responded, but only with a single phrase, path alignment, complete. Elarek spent more time in the core chamber. Not for diagnostics, but for presence. There, at the center of the ship, the resonance was strongest. He would sit cross-legged on the metallic floor, palms open, spiral faint beneath his skin, and listen. She spoke to him there, not in words, in tones, low frequencies, felt in his spine. Each vibration a question. Each pause an answer. When he closed his eyes, her presence wrapped around him like warmth in the middle of winter. The crew began to do the same. June brought cushions. Keswick brought moss from hydroponics. Voss didn't bring anything, just silence and closed eyes, and when they sat together, they breathed the same rhythm that at first. Elarek thought they were meditating, but then the lights changed, the walls trembled, gently. Like laughter, and something in the center of the floor pulsed outward, not energy. Not matter. A memory. They saw glimpses, all of them, a garden beneath black suns. Children with spiral eyes laughing in zero gravity. Hands sculpting planets. From glowing clay. A voice calling from the void, soft and eternal, return. When the vision faded, none of them spoke, they didn't need to. The Icarian had become more than a vessel, it had become an extension of them, and someone, was guiding them home. Block 8. The heat between silence. It began with a touch, not hers this time. Keswick had fallen asleep in the resonance chamber, and Elarek had remained behind, watching her chest rise and fall in slow synchrony with the hum of the floor beneath them. The spiral on her forearm pulsed softly, echoing the glow beneath his ribs that he didn't remember. Leaning toward her, only the warmth that rose when their fingers brushed. Keswick opened her eyes slowly, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Her gaze found his, and something passed between them. Not desire, not obligation. Something older, deeper, a familiarity without memory. Do you feel it? She asked, barely above a whisper. Elarek nodded. Like we've always been here. Her hand rose and touched his chest, over the spiral, and again, that heat, not lust, but stirring. A sensation that didn't rush, didn't demand. It bloomed, like breath held too long, finally released. His skin responded with a tremor he couldn't control, his body flooded with a flush of emotion he had no words for. They didn't kiss, they didn't need to, but in that closeness, their breath fell into rhythm. His thoughts stopped chasing meaning. And for the first time since the spiral entered his life, he surrendered, not to her. What they had become. She pressed her forehead gently to his, eyes closed, and both of them felt it, an echo not from within, but from the walls around them. The ship exhaled. And in that breath, the floor beneath them pulsed once, warmly. The Icarian had felt it too. Later, Elarek lay awake beside her, watching the soft glow of bio-light on the ceiling. But he wasn't confused. He wasn't afraid, but something had changed. What once was separate, body, thought, spirit, was now beginning to fuse, and he knew there would be no return to what they were before. Block 9, the vein, and the vessel. Elarek woke to silence, but not absence, the kind of silence that contained. The kind that listened. As he sat up in the low resonance of the core chamber, he felt the floor beneath him respond with warmth, almost like acknowledgement. Keswick had already gone, she left no trace, no words. But the air still carried the imprint of her body, heat suspended in the atmosphere like the afterglow of a thought too intimate to name. Elarek stood, bones light, skin humming. He made his way to the observatory, drawn not by duty, but by a quiet compulsion he could no longer ignore, and there, Captain Voss stood waiting. She didn't turn to greet him. Just spoke softly as her gaze remained fixed on the stars. She's not just guiding us, she said. She's growing us. Elarek said nothing, standing beside her. Voss slowly rolled back her sleeve. The spiral had changed shape again, not in size, but in structure. It now pulsed with a nested geometry, intricate like a living fractal. She showed me something, Voss continued. A seed that didn't take root the first time. One that failed before. We're the regrowth. Elarek felt a tremor through the deck beneath them, gentle, rhythmic, like a second pulse within the ship. You think this happened before? I know it did. She turned to face him now. Her eyes weren't just human anymore, there was depth there. Depth that reflected others. She needs us to remember what was lost, she said. and become what was meant to be. Outside the viewport, the stars shimmered unnaturally, and slowly, from within the blackness, something vast began to form. A structure. No, a presence. It wasn't approaching. It was already there, revealed now only because they had reached the right state to perceive it. The Icarian shifted course again, gently, almost reverently, and Elarek whispered, not to Voss, but to the presence beyond the glass, we're ready. Block 10. The threshold of return. The structure before them defied comprehension. It wasn't made of matter, not in any sense known to physics. It shimmered across dimensions, flickering between geometry and intention. Each time Elarek blinked, it changed form. A tower. A womb. A spiral in endless rotation. They had arrived, not at a place, but at a state. The crew assembled on the forward deck. No commands were given. They simply knew to be there, together. Keswick, June, Voss, all of them now bearing the spiral beneath their skin like a second circulatory system, and from the viewports, light began to pour in, not from the stars, from within the structure. She was there, not as the woman from the dreams. Not even as a form, but as presence so profound it made their thoughts fall silent. One by one, they closed their eyes, and the resonance began, low, deep, endless. It vibrated not through the ship, but through them. Bones sang. Blood warmed. Memory stirred. Not personal memories, but collective. Ancestral. Things buried in the bedrock of their biology, locked away for eras. Elarek felt his breath caught in his throat. Then he saw her again, not ahead of him, but inside. As she whispered, the return is not to a place. It is to what you were meant to become. And the spiral ignited, heat poured through every nerve ending. Not pain, release. Layers peeled away, a fear, doubt, time itself. Elarek felt his skin dissolve into light, his thoughts unfurl into the vast. He wasn't alone, every crew member glowed now, each form semi-transparent, pulsing in rhythm with the structure beyond. Then came the final step. The Icarian opened the hull, the systems, the walls, all folded back like petals in bloom. The ship did not die. It unveiled, the resonance chamber lifted, exposing them to what lay beyond, and the structure accepted them, not by pulling them in, but by merging. In that moment, Elarek understood, they were never meant to travel through space, they were meant to awaken. Rejoin a song that had waited eons for the next verse, and now, they sang.